Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Your book, Win Every Argument. Is this the perfect gift to give to one person in a couple?
I'm an author. I'm here to plug a book. I want everyone in the audience to buy the book. I want everyone at home to buy the book. But I beg you not to buy the book for your partner or to use on your partner. It's a disclaimer I have at the very start of the book. I can barely win an argument with my wife. I argue for a living, and it's been a long time since I've won an argument at home. So this book is for everyone, everywhere, except couples.
That's great. I'm still going to get it for me.
Good luck.
Obviously, there's a lot of debate, a lot of discussion on it's a tense time in the world, and in particular, there's been a lot of censorship around Palestinian voices and people who are even pushing against what Israel's actions in Gaza. In real censorship too. Like on Meta platforms. Being prohibited from saying anything on satirical news programs. So how are you supposed to argue or debate or even advocate for a people if you're not even allowed to speak on it?
It's a great question, and one of the reasons I wrote the book was because we have not just a lot of censorship right now in the world, in our societies, in the press, but of course foreign conflicts, domestic politics. We have a former president who threatens the network I work for, threatens the free press every day. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was because I wanted to equip ordinary people, good faith actors, decent people, with the skills and the rhetorical tricks and techniques to push back against the bullies and the bigots and the authoritarians and the gaslighters, because there's so many of them these days. They've taken over our public square. They've taken over some of our foreign policy debates. And therefore, you can't just put your head in the sand and operate in the old way or run away from this stuff. And I have a whole chapter in the book about how you deal with what I call gish gallopers, people who just want to overload you with BS. And we all know people like that in our public squares. So I'm trying to equip people with the skills to say, you know what, when I'm confronted with someone who lies or cuts me off or tries to talk over me or gaslights, I have the skills, I have the rhetorical techniques going back centuries to be able to say, no, we're going to speak out. And I think, look, on the conflict you mentioned, I am someone who has a show on television, right? So, sometimes I'm on social media saying, well, what about the media? I'm like, well, I am the media, right? Maybe I can do something different. And I do a show on MSNBC, I do a show on Peacock. And my thing is, okay, I'm going to try and platform as many voices as possible. So on my show, we have Israeli government officials. We've had people who lost people to Hamas on October the 7th in that horrific attack. And we've had ordinary Palestinians from on the ground in Gaza. And my worry is that we rightly, as a media, humanize those victims of the conflict on October the 7th, as we should, because what happened on October 7th was horrific. But we don't always, as a media, especially in the United States and the West, also humanize the Palestinian people. So I've tried to get people from all walks of life, Palestinian analysts, journalists, doctors, real people. And I think if you dehumanize a people, any people, and we're seeing that in America right now, rising anti-Semitism, rising Islamophobia. If you dehumanize a people, you end up with what happened in Vermont over the weekend. 3 young men of Palestinian descent shot in what's being looked at as a possible hate crime. A 6-year-old boy in Illinois, Wadea Al-Fayoum, stabbed to death 26 times in front of his mother in what is being charged as a hate crime. So dehumanization is the thing we all have to avoid, even in the most toughest and heated of debates.
Yeah, because obviously we're all people, and it's important to, like you said.
It's not obvious to everyone, sadly.
Yeah, sadly. Yeah, you're correct. Sadly, it's not obvious, and we should be able to talk to people from the other side, and as you have people from every side on your show, I would like to see other shows follow suit and have talk to everybody who's involved in everything.
100%.
And if we are going to, we talked about how there is misinformation everywhere. We have everyone has lied. We've got the media lying, we've got our government lying, we've got the IDF lying, we've got Hamas lying. Social media is a conveyor belt of lies. Where can people actually go to find what is actually happening?
Well, obviously, Sunday, 8 p.m. live, MSNBC. There's a show called The Mehdi Hasan Show. which is very opinionated but very factual. No, look, it's a real problem. And I don't think any journalist can honestly sit here and tell you, Michelle, that it's not a problem that we don't all grapple with, that we're trying to hold ourselves to the highest of standards, but also seeing that social media is a double-edged sword. It's been an amazing tool for voiceless people to get their voices out. Half of the stuff we know about what's coming out of Gaza is because of Instagram and social media, because, a lot of foreign media wasn't allowed in for a long time. So it's been very powerful in getting voices out. But of course, it also comes with so much misinformation. Like, there's not a day goes by where my feed doesn't have some conspiracy theory about the Palestinians or some conspiracy theory about the Israelis. So, look, I wish that we taught our kids from a very young age about digital social media literacy, about the importance of news media. As I said, I mentioned a moment ago, we have a former president, possibly the next president, threatening the free press. We don't talk enough about the importance of the free press and how to understand how to navigate the media. A lot of people just forward a lot of nonsense. And I think we've all got to hold ourselves to higher standards, whether we are producers of news or whether we're consumers of news. We all have a role to play. And one thing I would just say on the lying front, when we say, like, everyone lies, and I work in political news, people say it's politicians, they all lie. My worry with that argument, it takes you to a very dark place, because if everyone lies, then you just become a nihilist. You don't believe anyone or anything. And that only helps one group of people, which are the fascists, the authoritarians. Donald Trump doesn't lie because he wants you to believe him over the Democrat. He lies because he wants you to believe no one. And when you don't believe anyone, that's when the strongman arises. That's when authoritarianism comes. So we still have to remind ourselves there are people telling the truth. There are people trying to get the facts out. It's our job to try and find them and support them.
Yes, yes. I feel like we're really leaning heavily on hoping the bullies and the bigots don't read the book. And, when we talk about, you say, what if two people from both sides do know how to do an argument?
Yeah.
They say they do read your book.
Yeah.
What happens? Do we fall into a black hole?
It's a great question. What happens if two people buy the book and then get into an argument using the techniques that I lay out in the book? I would say it all depends which of them has read chapter 14. Chapter 14 is a very important chapter. It's the most important chapter of the book. It's called Practice Makes Perfect, right? Practice is what makes you perfect. Practice is what we do. And one thing that we don't do as public speakers, as debaters, as people out there, and you know this as a brilliant comedian, you don't just get up and just blah, 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 right? You have to prepare and practice. And people don't do that. And then they wonder why they lose arguments or lose in debates or aren't good at public speaking. Because you have to prepare. You spend, I'm sure, weeks, months, years preparing for one piece of work, right? I spent a lot of time on the book, on my TV show. I always remember Winston Churchill has this saying attributed to Churchill. He says, look, if you ask me to give you a 2-hour presentation, I can do it right now. But if you ask me to give you a 5-minute speech, I need 2 weeks to prepare, right? People don't realize to be brief, to be direct, to get your points across requires a lot of hard work, and we don't put in the effort. And you wouldn't hand over your taxes to an accountant who's just winging it, right? You wouldn't go under the knife with a doctor who's just winging it. But for some reason, we think when it comes to public speaking or addressing, we can just wing it. Nobody wings it. Even the greatest public speakers, and I say in the book, Churchill, Martin Luther King, all of them, JFK, all of them practiced, prepared, put in the time and effort to convince people.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we don't do these days is put in time or effort.
No, it's a very brief, transitory culture.
I want to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the Middle East. One of the things I've been wondering about is if the leaders of the Hamas are in the Four Seasons in Qatar, and Israel wants to rid the world of Hamas, and as much as I love a Four Seasons, why the constant bombardment of Gaza, and why not go to them?
I mean, I have to say, I don't know if you saw, I think it was the Four Seasons that put out a tweet saying, we have no guests here who are part of Hamas. And look, Twitter has very few roles left under Elon Musk, but like preventing a prominent hotel chain from getting droned is a pretty good use of Twitter. Look, a lot of people misunderstand what's happening in Qatar, in Doha, right? The negotiations that happen, a lot of Republicans have been like, look at Qatar, they're not really an ally, they're hosting Hamas. The Qataris are like, hold on, you told us to host Hamas and the Taliban, so we could be the intermediary for you to negotiate with these groups, just like we used to negotiate with the Taliban. Trump did it. And now we're having these hostage negotiations to try and get all those poor hostages out. And hostage-taking is a clear war crime, and we want to get those hostages out. Look, The reality is, I'm old school. You know, I don't think there are military solutions to political problems. I'm someone who covered Afghanistan for 20 years, where we went in with righteous rage, having been the victims of a horrific crime. We didn't think about what's going to happen the day after. We didn't think about what's the long-term plan. We didn't think, are the people going to welcome us? 20 years later, we left with our tail between our legs, loads of people dead, and the Taliban still run Afghanistan. So I would say, let's be careful before we just decide that the solution to every problem is we can drop a bomb or we can fire a bullet. This is a political problem. It's a problem of occupation. It's a problem of injustice. It's a problem that goes back decades, right? And you cannot resolve it with dropping, 6,000 pounds of bombs or whatever it is in the space of a few weeks. And look, I just want to say one important point on this. People, you know, in times like this, we get into our teams, we take our sides, everyone's in a polarized moment, arguing. At a time like this, the number one bias we should have is not political or religious, it should be humanitarian. It should be human. What is happening in Gaza right now? I don't care whether you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, whatever. Like, the UN is saying it's the most dangerous place in the world to be a child. The Committee to Protect Journalists says it's the deadliest conflict on record for journalists. The UN Secretary General says more UN employees have been killed in Gaza than any conflict in the UN's history. You know, the Pope is calling it terrorism now, which his word, not my word. I don't know if he's going to get cancelled for that. He probably won't be in the next Scream movie. But people, it's really, really bad.
Like, I don't know, with a hat like that.
Maybe. You're giving them ideas now. But it's so bad right now. People are talking about the brink of famine, dysentery, disease, countless deaths. Let us first be biased as human beings before we are biased as Israelis, Palestinians, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Americans. For me, right now, that's the priority.
Yeah. I 100% agree. I think this is a moment to be completely human and realize that, you know, we should be able to talk with our mouths instead of bombing with our bombs.
And if you need a book to help you talk with your mouths. I'm shameless.
When you have a book, you got to. No one's going to sell it but you.
But no married couples.
Win Our Argument is available now. The Mehdi Hasan Show airs Sundays on MSNBC.